I never imagined my marriage would turn into a battlefield. On one side, my 23-year-old wife, who sacrificed everything, her youth, her career, her freedom to care for my dying mother. On the other side, my 9 siblings, who offered no real help but hurled accusations, insults, and demands. And the cruelest twist of all, the woman who once adored my wife, my own mother, turned against her. To everyone else, my wife is the villain. But I know the truth is far more complicated and far more painful. My name is David. I'm 33 years old, the third of 10 children in a loud, messy, complicated family. Growing up, my house was never quiet. Someone was always crying, yelling, fighting, or laughing. My mother, Mary, somehow held it all together after my father passed away when I was still a teenager. She was tougher than most people realized. When I married Emily 2 years ago, I thought life would finally calm down. Emily was only 21 back then, but she carried herself with a quiet grace that could soften any room. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was, but she had this way of making people feel safe around her. Even my mother, who had a reputation for being difficult, warmed up to Emily faster than I expected. In the first year of our marriage, I often caught moments that made my heart swell with pride. Emily helping Mum into the kitchen, Emily laughing at one of her old stories, Emily making a cup of tea just the way Mum liked it. For a while, I thought I had achieved the impossible. Peace between my wife and my mother. But peace never lasts forever. It started with fatigue. My mum would sit in her chair longer than usual, complaining she was tired. Then she began losing weight. She brushed it off as just getting older, but when she collapsed one afternoon in her garden, we rushed her to the hospital. That's when the truth came crashing downstage for cancer. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, Emily holding my hand so tight it turned white. My 9 siblings were there, scattered in chairs, whispering, asking questions. But in the middle of all that chaos, my mother looked only at me. "David," she said, her voice steady, "I want to stay at home. No hospitals, no machines, just home." It was Emily who nodded first. "We'll take care of you, Mum, I promise." She didn't know what she was signing up for. Neither of us did. At first, it was manageable. A few medications, some help with meals, gentle reminders to drink water. But cancer doesn't stay gentle for long. Soon, Emily was bathing her, cleaning up after her, giving her medication around the clock. She became a nurse, a housekeeper, and a caretaker all in one, while still working her job and taking care of our little boy. I would wake up at 2 a.m. to find Emily sitting at my mother's bedside, wiping sweat from her forehead, whispering, "It's okay. Mum, I'm here." Her eyes were heavy, her hair a tangled mess, but her hands were steady, gentle. Meanwhile, my siblings, well, they drifted in and out. A visit here, a phone call there. Excuses piled up: work, kids, money. And little by little, every responsibility shifted onto Emily's shoulders. I told myself I would help more. I promised her I would. But I also saw how naturally she cared, how easily my mother leaned on her, and I let myself believe she could handle it. That was the beginning of our story. The story of how my young wife became the unwilling savior of my family. A story that would soon twist into something darker, uglier, and far more destructive than either of us ever imagined. The days began to blur together. Morning, afternoon, night, it didn't matter. The rhythm of our lives now followed one thing only: my mother's illness, Emily's alarm would go off at 6. Not because she had work, but because Mum's first round of medication had to be given on schedule. She would slip quietly out of bed, brush her hair back, and pad barefoot down the hallway to Mum's room. Sometimes I followed her. I'd stand in the doorway, watching as she gently woke my mother. "Good morning, Mom," she'd whisper, adjusting the pillows, checking her temperature, offering a glass of water. It was the kind of tenderness most people could only fake, but Emily never faked anything. She meant it, and yet, I could see the cracks forming. She'd come back to our room after tending to Mum, her face pale from lack of sleep. She'd collapse on the bed next to me, close her eyes, and whisper, "Just 10 more minutes," before dragging herself up again to get ready for work. She had her own job to manage, not to mention taking care of our son, meals, laundry, bills, the entire household. I tried to help. I did, but between my job and my attempts to be present for both Emily and Mum, I often failed to see how much Emily was drowning. One evening, after putting our son to bed, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. The only light came from the stove lamp. She didn't even notice me at first. "Em," I asked softly. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I can't do this alone, David. It's too much." Her words hit me like a hammer. For months, she had carried everything without complaint, and now she was breaking. I took her hands, but she pulled away. "Your brothers and sisters, they don't even call. They don't ask if she needs anything. They just assume I'll handle it. Do they think I'm some kind of maid?" I didn't know what to say, because in a way, she was right, they did assume. Everyone in my family had slipped into a comfortable narrative. Emily takes care of Mum. That's how it is. When my siblings did show up, it was for a few hours at most. They'd bring flowers, maybe a pie, sit and chat with Mum, then leave with smiles on their faces. And Emily would be left to clean up the dishes, adjust Mum's medication, and make sure she was comfortable through the night. What made it worse was how quickly they praised themselves afterward. I'd hear my sister on the phone, bragging to relatives about how much time she'd been spending with Mum. My brother once posted on Facebook, "Family first. Taking care of Mum is a blessing." He had spent exactly 90 minutes at our house that week. 90. Emily saw those posts too. She never said anything out loud, but I saw the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes hardened. One night, after my siblings left, Emily finally let it slip. "They take pictures, David. They take pictures with her, smiling, and then they leave me to clean up the mess. And everyone thinks they're angels, while her voice cracked, while I'm invisible. Invisible. That word stuck with me, because it was true. At church, people would pat my siblings on the back, praising them for being such devoted children. At family gatherings, they would talk about how hard it was for them to see Mum in this condition. And all the while, Emily stayed in the shadows, her sacrifices unseen, her exhaustion ignored. But I saw, and I began to realize something dangerous. I was relying on her too much. I was letting her carry a weight that no 23-year-old should ever have to carry. One Saturday morning, I walked into the living room and found Emily on her knees, scrubbing the carpet where Mum had spilled a cup of tea. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her hands red from cleaning chemicals. Mum sat in her chair, watching silently, while our son toddled nearby with his toy truck. It was a picture of everything wrong in our lives. I crouched down beside her. "Stop, please, Emily. Let me do it. She shook her head. It's fine. I've got it. No, I said firmly. You don't got it. You're exhausted. You're falling apart. That was the first time she really looked at me with anger in her eyes. Then do something, David, because if I stop, no one else will. Not your brothers, not your sisters. Just me. Her voice was sharp, but beneath it was desperation. A plea I had ignored for too long. That night, lying awake, I realized something terrifying. My wife was becoming more than just a caretaker. She was becoming a ghost of herself. And if something didn't change, I was going to lose her, even while she slept beside me. The first real cracks in the family didn't appear with Mum's diagnosis. No, it came months later, when my siblings realized just how much they had escaped. It began with a phone call. My sister Anna rang me on a Tuesday evening. "David, we've been talking," she said, her voice sharp. "We think Mum should spend more time with all of us. She can't just stay cooped up at your house all the time." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Anna, she's in palliative care. The nurses specifically said traveling is risky. She's still our mother," Anna snapped. "You don't get to decide everything just because she lives with you." I wanted to argue, but I could hear my other siblings in the background chiming in. "Yeah, it's not fair. He's keeping her from us. Emily's controlling everything." Emily was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. She glanced up when she heard the anger in my voice. I shook my head, signaling her to stay out of it, but she heard enough of the conversation to know. That night, after I hung up, Emily set the ladle down and said, "So now I'm the bad guy." I sighed. They don't understand. They think we're keeping her from them. Her laugh was bitter. Keeping her from them. They come here whenever they want. They sit for an hour, take selfies, post them online, and vanish. And I'm the one keeping her from them. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. "David, I can't fight this battle. Not while I'm taking care of her every waking second." The thing was, she was right. My siblings weren't stepping in. They weren't taking night shifts, or scrubbing the bathroom floor, or holding Mum's hand when she cried from the pain. They wanted the glory of being the good children, but none of the sacrifice. Still, their resentment grew. They began showing up unannounced, barging into the house, making suggestions, criticizing little things. "Why is Mum wearing that sweater? It's too warm in here. Why hasn't she had more visitors? Why isn't she sitting in the sun?" Each question was aimed at Emily. Never me. Always her. I watched the way Emily's smile grew tighter with each visit, the way her hands shook as she poured tea, the way she bit her tongue instead of answering back. Later, when they left, she would retreat to our bedroom, close the door, and sit in silence. One evening, I found her curled up on the bed, tears streaking her face. "I don't belong in this family, David," she whispered. My chest ached. "That's not true." "Yes, it is. They don't see me as your wife. They see me as an obstacle, someone in their way." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I knew she wasn't. Resentment has a way of poisoning the air, even when no one speaks. By the time fall rolled around, the tension was thick enough to choke on. My siblings would glare at Emily behind her back, mutter things under their breath. Sometimes I caught the words, bossy, cold, selfish, selfish. The word nearly broke me. How could anyone call her selfish when she had given up everything, her job opportunities, her freedom, even her health, to keep our mother alive and comfortable. One Sunday afternoon, the whole family gathered in our living room. Mum was sitting in her armchair, frail but alert. Emily had prepared sandwiches, tea, and fruit platters, spending hours in the kitchen, while I tried to tidy the house. As everyone ate and laughed, I noticed Emily sitting off to the side, barely touching her food. She was pale, her hands trembling. She caught my eye, and I knew. She was exhausted beyond words. Then it happened. My brother Michael leaned forward and said, "You know, maybe it's time we hire someone else. Emily looks like she can't handle it anymore." The room went silent. Emily froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at me, her eyes wide with hurt. I slammed my hand on the table. "Don't you dare," Michael shrugged. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She's too young for this. And maybe Mum would be happier if she wasn't stuck here all the time." My mother frowned, looking between us, uncertain. My sisters shifted uncomfortably, but no one defended Emily. She stood up quietly, her chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, she carried the empty tea tray into the kitchen. I followed a moment later. She was standing at the sink, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles were white. Don't," her voice cracked. She turned to me, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't keep doing this if they see me as the problem. I can take the work, the sleepless nights, the endless care, but not this. Not being treated like I'm nothing." Her words tore through me, because I realized she wasn't just fighting exhaustion anymore. She was fighting a family that refused to see her worth. And I was stuck in the middle, torn between blood and love, loyalty and marriage. That was when I began to fear that no matter how hard she tried, no matter how much she gave, my family would never truly accept Emily, and one day soon, something would break. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Morning routines that once carried a sense of rhythm, coffee brewing, the sound of my wife humming softly in the kitchen. My son giggling at cartoons were now interrupted by the steady weight of caretaking duties. Every cough, every groan from my mother pierced the walls like a siren, and with each sound I could see the way my wife's shoulders stiffened, her eyes darkening with fatigue. I wanted to believe that love could sustain her, that her compassion was limitless, that the bond between caregiver and patient could somehow eclipse the bitterness from the outside world. But the truth was harder, more painful. Compassion was finite. Every day she gave a little more of herself, and every night she collapsed into bed with less and less left to offer. Her body was here, in this house, carrying the weight of responsibility. But her spirit, I could see it drifting further away from me. The siblings didn't help. They called often, not to ask how my mother was really doing, not to offer to pick up groceries or pay for a nurse, but to bark accusations through the phone. "Why aren't you letting us see her? Why did you cancel the trip? Who gave you the right to decide?" They didn't see the vomit my wife cleaned from the sheets. They didn't see the trembling hands she held during long, restless nights. They didn't see how she woke up at dawn, cooked breakfast for our child, and still somehow made it to work before rushing back to prepare medication. They didn't see any of it. But my wife, she felt all of it. Every insult, every glare, every accusation sharpened itself against her already fragile spirit. And I, her husband, was stuck between two worlds. The blood family that accused us, and the chosen family I swore to protect. And here's the truth I didn't want to admit. I was starting to resent my mother. Resentment's such a dangerous, shameful word. but it was there. Every time she echoed the sibling's venom, every time she looked at my wife with suspicion, I felt a quiet fury build inside me. This wasn't the woman who raised me. Or maybe it wasn't, I had just never seen this side of her until now. The house felt colder. Meals were quieter. My wife's laugh, once the soundtrack of my evenings, now came in short, forced bursts. I could sense her walls going up, brick by brick, trying to protect herself from both the siblings and from my mother's cruel whispers. And me. I stood in the middle, holding rubble in my hands, pretending I could still keep the house from collapsing. It was a Saturday afternoon, when the storm finally arrived, the kind you see in the sky, but the kind that walks in on 2 feet, fueled by rage and entitlement. I remember the knock. No, not a knocker pounding. 3 heavy thuds that rattled the wood. The kind of knock that doesn't ask for permission but demands entry. My wife froze in the kitchen, her hands still wrapped around a dish towel. Her eyes darted to me, wide and exhausted, silently begging me not to make her face whatever was on the other side of that door. I knew who it was before I even opened it, when I pulled the door open. There they were, 3 of my brothers and 1 sister, standing like an army on my front porch. Their faces weren't kind. They weren't here for comfort. They were here for war. Move, my oldest brother barked, his chest puffed out like he owned the very air I was breathing. We're here to see Mum. You could have called, I muttered, trying to keep my voice calm. My son was in the living room, just a few feet away. The last thing he needed was to hear shouting. We tried calling, my sister snapped. Your wife never picks up. Always blocking us, always keeping Mom away from us. And there it was, the accusation. Sharp and heavy, hanging between us like smoke. My wife stepped into the hallway, her voice trembling but steady. I don't keep her from you. I protect her. She's too weak for long visits. The nurse said don't. My brother cut her off, jabbing his finger toward her. Don't you dare talk like you know better than us. She's our mother, not yours. You don't get to decide. Something inside me flared, hot and sudden. I stepped forward, putting myself between them and my wife. She's been the one taking care of Mum for over a year. She has every right to speak. More than any of you, frankly. Their eyes burned into me, betrayal and anger mixing in equal measure. To them, I wasn't defending my why, was betraying my blood. She's manipulating you, my sister hissed. She wants to cut us out. Can't you see that? Behind me, I heard a soft gasp. My wife's hand slipped into mine, shaking but firm. She wasn't going to break knot in front of them. But I could feel the toll it was taking. Every insult, every dismissal was carving another wound into her already battered spirit. I should have thrown them out right then, slammed the door, protected the fragile peace of our home. But a part of me still wanted to believe we could reason with them, that if I just said the right words, they'd understand, so I let them in. It was a mistake I'd regret almost instantly. Inside, the house felt tighter, suffocating. My mother sat in her chair, frail and pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw them. And for a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, their visit would be gentle. But it wasn't. They crowded around her, their voices rising, filling her ears with poisonous words. Mum, you don't have to listen to her. Mum, we wanted to take you on a trip, remember? But she stopped us. She thinks she's better than us. She doesn't care about you like we do. I watched as my mother's smile faltered, her eyes shifting toward my wife with something cold, something sharp. The poison was working, and my wife. She stood there, silent, her hands clasped so tightly I thought her knuckles might break. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just absorbed the venom like she had been doing for weeks. I should have spoken louder. I should have shielded her more. But I was torn, split down the middle, son on one side, husband on the other. And that hesitation, that tiny crack in my resolve, was all my siblings needed to push harder. The visit ended in shouting. My wife retreated to our bedroom, my son hiding under his blanket as the echoes of anger filled the house. When the door finally slammed shut behind my siblings, the silence left behind felt heavier than the noise. I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the floor. When I sat beside her, she didn't lean into me like she used to. She just whispered, "I can't do this anymore," and for the first time, I believed her. The days after that confrontation felt like aftershocks of an earthquake. The house looked the same. The furniture hadn't moved. The walls hadn't cracked. But the air was different. My wife no longer moved with the quiet determination she once had. Instead, she carried herself like a ghost wandering her own home. She did what needed to be done: meals, medicine, laundry, but each task seemed to pull her deeper into a hollow silence. I caught her crying once. She thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. The sound woke me in the middle of the night. A muffled sob, her hand pressed against her mouth to keep it quiet. I turned over, reached for her, but she pulled away, whispering, "Please, don't." That word cut deeper than any of my siblings' insults. Because it wasn't me she was pushing. A weight was everything. Every hand that tried to comfort her, every promise that things would get better, every hope she once held. She was unraveling, and in my weakest moments, I resented her for it. Not because she was weak, she wasn't, but because her pain was a mirror of my own failures. Every tear she shed reminded me that I hadn't protected her, that I had let my siblings' venom seep into our home, that I had let my mother's coldness wedge itself between us. Our son noticed, too. Kids always do. He started asking why Mummy didn't smile anymore, why she didn't play with him like before. I told him Mummy was tired, that she was doing something very important. But how do you explain to a child that love sometimes looks like suffering? The weight of it all sat on my chest, heavy and suffocating. And at night, when the house was finally quiet, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder, what if she leaves? Because that was the truth I could no longer deny. If something didn't change, I wasn't just going to lose my mother. I was going to lose my wife. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday. Not in some dramatic outburst, not in flames and fury, but in the quiet collapse of a woman who had given too much. I came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of pills in front of her. Not opened, not empty, just sitting there like a threat, like a warning. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I'm drowning. And every time I try to come up for air, they push me back under." I sat across from her, my hands trembling. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that we were strong enough to survive this. But the words felt hollow, because deep down, I knew we weren't strong enough. "Not like this. They hate me," she said, her voice breaking. "Your brothers, your sisters, even your mother. No matter what I do, it's never enough. And I can't." I can't keep giving when all I get back is hate. Her words weren't angry. They weren't bitter. They were broken. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized that love wasn't just about standing beside her. It was about choosing her. Over the noise, over the blood ties, over the guilt that had shackled me since this began. I reached for her hands, holding them tight. "Then we're done," I said. "No more. You've given everything, and it's enough. If my family can't see that, then they don't deserve to be part of this. You come first, you and our son, always." For the first time in weeks, she looked at me, not past me, not through me, but at me. And in her eyes, I saw the faintest flicker of something I thought we had lost. Hope. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a cure. But it was a promise. A promise that I would no longer stand in the middle, torn apart. A promise that my loyalty would no longer be divided. A promise that, from this moment forward, my wife came first. And as terrifying as it was, I felt something shift in me. For the first time, I wasn't just a son watching his mother fade away. I was a husband fighting for his family's survival. Peace lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. Dozens of missed calls. Messages stacked one after another. My siblings had unleashed their fury in group texts, in voicemails. Even on social media. "You've let her brainwash you. You're abandoning Mom in her last days. You'll regret this when she's gone." Screenshots started flooding in posts from cousins, family, friends, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. The story was spreading. I was the ungrateful son, and my wife was the manipulative outsider who had stolen their mother from them by noon. My brother was on the front lawn, shouting my name. By 2, another car pulled up, and by evening, my quiet neighborhood looked like the staging ground for a family war. Inside, my wife kept her distance, pulling our son close while I stood by the window, watching the people I once trusted turn into something unrecognizable. My heart pounded, not from fear of them, but from the realization that I was running out of time to act. When I finally stepped outside, the air was heavy, thick with tension. My siblings circled me like vultures, voices raised, hands pointing, spitting accusations faster than I could process. "You've changed. She's turned you against us. Mum is suffering because of you." I stood tall, though my knees threatened to buckle. "No, Mum is comfortable because of her. Because my wife has done more for Mum in 18 months than all of you have. Done in your entire lives." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the eruption. "She's not family." One brother shouted. "She's destroying this family." My sister added, tears streaming down her face. And that's when I broke. My voice, raw and louder than I'd ever heard it, cut through the chaos. Family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who stays when things get hard. Family is the person scrubbing vomit off the floor at 3 a.m. while the rest of you are asleep in your own beds. So don't you dare tell me she isn't family. They looked stunned, as if the words had come from a stranger. Maybe they had. Maybe I wasn't the brother they once knew anymore. But I didn't care. Because in that moment, I finally knew where I stood. The shouting drew my mother from her chair. She appeared in the doorway, frail and trembling. But her voice was sharp enough to cut through the noise. "What is going on out here?" she demanded. All at once. The siblings turned toward her, their voices softening, their bodies shrinking into roles of obedient children. Mum. He's letting her control everything. Mum. We just want what's best for you. Mum. We love you more than she ever could. Her eyes shifted from them to me, to my wife, who stood quietly in the shadows of the living room, clutching our son's hand. And then, with a voice cold enough to shatter the fragile peace, my mother said, "She's not one of us. She never will be." The words sliced through my wife like a blade. I saw her flinch, saw her shoulders collapse inward. She didn't cry, she didn't have tears left to give, but the pain in her eyes was louder than any scream, and that was it. That was the moment I knew my mother was gone, not physically, not yet, but gone in every way that mattered. Whatever bond we once had been poisoned beyond repair. The night after the showdown, I lay awake in the dark, my wife curled tightly beside me, our son asleep at her other side. I listened to their breathing, steady and fragile, and realized that my choice had already been made. I couldn't be the bridge anymore. Bridges get walked on, get broken, get burned. I had to pick a side, and the side I chose was the one lying right next to me. The next morning, I called my siblings. One by one, I told them the same thing. If you can't respect my wife, you can't come here. If you can't trust the care she's given, then you don't deserve to be part of this. I won't let you destroy my marriage. I won't let you destroy my family. Some hung up on me. Others shouted until I ended the call. A few cried, begged me to reconsider. But my voice didn't waver. Not this time. When I hung up the last call, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the family I had lost. Relief for the family I was saving. I turned to my wife, who stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. And when I whispered, "It's just us now," she finally broke, falling into my arms, sobbing with a release that shook her entire body. And in that moment, for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. For a brief moment, the house was quiet again. Not peaceful, not joyful, but quiet. The siblings stayed away, at least physically. The phone calls stopped. The pounding on the door stopped. Even the angry texts slowed to a trickle. But silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes silence is the warning before the next strike. I could feel it in my bones. They weren't finished with us. My wife tried to use the lull to heal. She slept a little more. She let herself breathe without looking over her shoulder. I caught her smiling at our son, once really smiling, and it hit me just how long it had been since I'd seen her face light up like that. But healing isn't linear. One smile didn't erase the nights she still woke trembling, or the way she flinched when the phone rang unexpectedly. Trauma lingers in the walls, in the air, in the silence between conversations. And though she was trying, she was still carrying more weight than anyone should have to bear, and me. I lived in two worlds, relief that I had finally chosen her, and dread for the retaliation I knew was coming. It came sooner than I expected. A letter arrived in the mail, thick and official. When I tore it open, the words blurred together at first. Petition, guardianship, legal rights. My siblings weren't done. They were taking us to court. The accusation was clear. My wife was interfering with family affairs, isolating our mother, and exerting undue influence. In other words, they wanted legal control over her control they could use to push my wife out completely. When I handed her the papers, she went pale. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "They won't stop until they destroy me." I pulled her close, but my own hands were shaking, because part of me knew she was right. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring at the papers. I thought about lawyers, about courtrooms, about standing in front of a judge, trying to prove that the woman who had given everything for my mother wasn't the villain my siblings claimed she was. And for the first time, I wondered if we'd win as the legal threats loomed. My mother's health spiraled. She grew weaker, her body frailer, her voice thinner, but her bitterness, that remained sharp. She no longer smiled at my wife. She rarely thanked her. Instead, she absorbed my siblings' poison and reflected it back in quiet, cutting remarks. "You don't need to hover. You think you know better than me. You're not my daughter." Each word chipped away at my wife's spirit. And yet, she still stayed. She still brought my mother water, still adjusted her pillows, still made her soup when she refused to eat. That's the thing about my wife. Even when love wasn't returned, she gave it anyway. Not because she owed it, not because she was weak, but because it was who she was. And watching her, I realized something my siblings never would. She had already proven herself family, not through blood, not through a last name, but through sacrifice. And yet, I couldn't ignore the truth. She was burning out. And if I didn't protect her, I'd lose her. The court date loomed. The house felt colder, and my wife's exhaustion deepened. But something in me had changed since the showdown. I was no longer standing in the middle, waiting for things to collapse. I became a shield. When my siblings called, I didn't answer. When they came to the door, I didn't let them in. When my mother repeated their accusations, I corrected her, firmly, calmly, without apology. At first, my wife didn't believe it. She looked at me like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for me to slip back into hesitation. But as the days passed, she started to see I meant it. One evening, as we sat together after putting our son to bed, she whispered, "You're different." I squeezed her hand. "No, I'm just finally the husband you deserved all along." And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight on her shoulders lift just slightly, just enough. The storm wasn't over. The courtroom still waited. My mother's time was running out. But for now, in this small, fragile space, we had reclaimed something we thought we had lost. Us. The courthouse smelled of dust and paper, a place where family love turned into legal strategy. We sat at one table, my wife, me, and a lawyer we could barely afford. Across from us, my siblings filled the other side, 5 of them shoulder to shoulder, their lawyer sharp-suited and sharp-tongued. The judge looked down at us like we were chess pieces. "This petition," he began, "seeks to grant guardianship of your mother to her biological children, citing claims of isolation, neglect, and undue influence by the respondent, your wife." My wife's hand gripped mine under the table. I felt the tremor in her fingers. She hated this. Not because she feared the law, but because she couldn't understand how the people she'd sacrificed for could twist her devotion into cruelty. My siblings took turns painting her as a villain. They called her controlling. They said she was selfish. They accused her of manipulating me. When it was my turn, I stood and told the truth. About the nights she stayed awake with my mother while the rest of us slept. About the medications, the baths, the meals. About how she held our family together while theirs unraveled. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I simply laid out the facts no one could deny, though many refused to hear. And when the judge finally adjourned, saying he needed time to deliberate, I looked at my wife and whispered, "No matter what happens, you've already won," because the truth was, even if the law failed her, she had already proven herself in ways no courtroom could measure. The trial didn't end the war, it fueled it. My siblings doubled down, calling neighbors, spreading lies to extended family. My phone became a battlefield of accusations. "You've turned your back on us. She's poisoned you. Mum deserves better than this." At first, I tried ignoring them. Then I blocked them. But lies have a way of finding cracks to seep through. One day at work, a colleague asked softly, "Is it true your wife kept your mum from her children?" The shame burned, not because I doubted my wife, but because the world now questioned her goodness. And that was a wound I couldn't heal with words alone. Meanwhile, at home, the pressure mounted. My mother's health was collapsing fast. She slept more, ate less. And though my wife cared for her with the same devotion, the tension between them was undeniable. Every word my mother spoke carried judgment. Every silence carried accusation. It was killing my wife, slowly, one sigh, one insult, one sleepless night at a time. It happened sooner than we expected. One evening, I came home to find the house unusually quiet. My wife sat beside my mother's bed, holding her hand. My mother's breathing was shallow, her eyes closed. "She doesn't have much time," my wife whispered. I stood there, paralyzed. This was the woman who had raised me, who had once been my anchor. And yet, as I looked at her now, I couldn't untangle the love from the hurt. My siblings rushed over that night. For once, they weren't shouting. They surrounded her bed, crying, holding her hand, speaking words of love they hadn't spoken in years. And my wife, she stayed in the corner, silent, her presence barely acknowledged. She had given more than anyone, and now, in these final moments, she was invisible. I wanted to rage. I wanted to demand they thank her, recognize her, admit that without her, our mother's last years would have been unbearable. But when I looked at her face, I realized she didn't need their gratitude. She only needed my loyalty. When my mother took her final breath, it was my wife's hand she held, not my siblings. And that, more than any words, was the truth. The funeral was chaos stairs, accusations, silence. My siblings barely looked at my wife. Some refused to speak to me. To them, the war wasn't over, but to us, it was. Because when we came home that night, exhausted and hollow, my wife collapsed into my arms. For the first time in months, she let the tears fall freely. Not just grief for my mother, but grief for everything she had endured. I held her, whispering over and over, "It's just us now, just us." And in that moment, I understood the choice I had made. I hadn't chosen her over my mother. I hadn't chosen her over my siblings. I had chosen the family that would carry me forward, not the one that was pulling me backward. It wasn't a happy ending. Too much had been lost. Too many scars remained. But it was a true ending, one that carved a line in the sand and dared anyone to cross it. Because sometimes, family isn't who you're born to. It's who you fight for. And I had finally learned who was worth fighting for. After the funeral, silence became my new inheritance. My siblings stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped acknowledging me altogether. Years of shared childhood memories, birthdays, vacations, secrets vanished into nothing. On social media, I saw traces of them. Pictures of family gatherings where my name and my wife's were conspicuously absent. Subtle captions about loyalty and true family. I didn't need to ask. I knew those barbs were aimed at me. At first, the silence stung like salt in an open wound. I thought of reaching out, of begging them to understand. But then I would look at my wife, tired, wounded, yet still carrying herself with quiet dignity, and I knew to mend with them would mean betraying her, and that was a cost I could never pay. But choosing her didn't mean the war was over. Grief has a way of seeping into cracks, and our marriage had plenty. Some nights, I would wake to find her staring at the ceiling, her face unreadable. "Do you regret it?" I asked once. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "I regret nothing about caring for your mother, but I regret what it did to us." Her words cut deep, because she was right. Caring for my mother had drained her, tested us, and in many ways, changed us forever. We no longer laughed as eyes. We no longer touched as casually. Every tender moment seemed weighed down by invisible ghosts. I tried to fix it with flowers, with long talks, with promises of better days ahead. But healing wasn't quick, and it wasn't simple. It was like trying to stitch a wound that refused to close. Time, though, has a strange way of softening jagged edges. Months after my mother's passing, we took a trip, just the two of us. A small cabin by a lake, far from the noise, far from the battles. We cooked together. We walked in silence. We watched the sunrise, and, for the first time in what felt like years, we held each other without words, without weight. It wasn't a miracle cure. The scars remained, but in that stillness, I saw a glimpse of us again, the us before the war, before the bitterness, before the betrayals, and I realized that love wasn't about never breaking. It was about choosing, every day, to piece things back together, even if the pieces never quite fit the way they used to. The truth is, I don't know if I'll ever reconcile with my siblings. Maybe one day, maybe never. But I've stopped waiting for their call, because the family I needed was already here beside me, holding my hand, choosing me even when it cost her everything. Our marriage isn't perfect. It's messy, it's scarred, it's complicated. But it's real, and it's ours. Sometimes, late at night, I think about my mother. I wonder if she ever truly saw what my wife gave her. If she did, she never said it. But I hold on to one memory, the way her hand gripped my wife's in her final breath. Maybe that was her unspoken thank you. And maybe that's enough, because in the end, this story isn't about loss or betrayal or even family wars. It's about survival. It's about love that refuses to die, even when everything around it tries to kill it. And as long as we keep choosing each other, day after day, then maybe, just maybe, we've already won. Asterisk.